The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, September 17th, we had a busy week preparing for our speaking engagements, and time is flying by. Opening day in Illinois will be here before we know it. Kentucky's already happening. It's still dry. Just a lot going on to try to get ready for deer season, getting in full swing.
Yep, 2 weeks from today here in Illinois, and I guess I'm ready to get to the woods. I need some wind down time sitting in a tree, just unwinding from a stressful few weeks here. And I had a good event. Spoke at on Friday night. Had a crowd that they came from 10 states: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, Missouri, Iowa, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. So
wow.
People came from a long way. Yeah, all men. Is men's retreat. And I spoke Friday night and then again Saturday morning. The guys there at the church put on or cooked a good breakfast. So about half of the crowd was there for the breakfast on Saturday morning. And Wes Delks and I basically took questions from the crowd and did that for a couple hours on Saturday morning. So appreciate everybody turning out for that. And you had a huge crowd at the one you spoke at.
Yeah, the folks at Tag Out do a fantastic job. This has always been a big event. I was actually worried that it wouldn't be as big with me being the speaker that was there, but they had between 550, 600 people come. And I want to tell you what, that's just such a generous group of people up there that was raising money for families in need and the Lester's Feet Foundation. We raised $50,000 that day. The food was awesome. Just a great group of people up there, just humbled to be asked to be part of it.
Yeah, that's a good event. I was there, I think, at the very first one they ever had a few years ago, and I haven't been back since, but I know the people there. I've known those people for a long time. So
our buddies Ray and Aiden drove all the way over there to come support me. I had a good friend from high school up in Michigan that drove down. Wes Delks and Austin Razor rode up with me, and we ended up staying in a cabin and sitting around a campfire with a bunch of the guys from Tag Out till way too late in the morning, and got a couple hours sleep and then drove home. But I tell you, that's the first time I've ever had to speak in front of an mostly Amish crowd, and I learned a few lessons. They aren't up to speed as much on my redneck jokes as what normal conversation would be. So I'm going to have to kind of be a little bit more careful. I got a couple glazed over looks with a redneck joke a couple times, but I told you before, all of those people there getting together, raising money. But the highlight for me is one younger Amish guy that's got a family came up to me and asked me to go outside and pray with him after I got done speaking. So you talk about God working in weird ways. I was nervous and stomach was upset and thought, man, I really botched this and didn't do a very good job trying to. I'm not a preacher, I admit it, and but when one guy comes up and asks you to come pray with him about the topic that you talked about, that's God moving, and it's all worth it.
Yeah, for sure. I had my talk on Friday night. I kind of shared some of my background. I just turned 60, and my question pretty early in my talk was, how many people have known me 20 years or more? And there was only like 4 or 5 in the whole crowd. And I said, okay, so for 2/3 of my life, more than 2/3 of my life, most of you didn't even know me. You just know me, who I am today. I'm going to go back and I'm going to share some things in my earlier days. And so you can see, how far I've come from, where I started. I went clear back to high school and told my story leading up to, kind of where I am today, and some of the challenges I did, some of the stupid things I did. And, earlier that day, I had someone say that I'm one of those "it must be nice" people. It must be nice to have your own farm in Illinois. It must be nice to have nice tractors to plant your food plots. And I wanted to encourage the crowd and let them know that, it must be nice today because of 50 years of effort to get here to where I'm at, and encourage them that whatever their dreams are, they can chase those dreams just like I did, and make them come true. And how God opens doors, but often those blessings are just an unlocked door. It requires something of us as well. And that's what I did, really, was take advantage of every opportunity that came my way. But I won't spoil it. Steve Shields was there and he videotaped the whole thing. And we're going to put it on our YouTube channel. And so, anybody can see it. So I won't say any more. I don't want to spoil it for those who might want to see it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's give a little bit of a hunting update. It has been one of those weird couple weeks. Not only is it dry, but we had the temperature drop. And the last few times, of course, I've been out of town a couple days, but the last few days, including Saturday night, we're recording on Saturday this week, we got a northeast wind here in Kentucky. So I have not hunted, but there was another 200-inch deer shot very close to me, probably 25 minutes away last night. So there has been a couple big deer. We talked about Brandon Epperson's and then this one. But we got a lot of kind of common feedback back from everybody for last week's episode, where we said that, the antler growth and age structure was just kind of a little bit disappointing this year. And people don't listen real well. They jump to fire off a comment and they don't listen to what we say all the way through. You said there's going to be giants killed. There's still going to be giants. But, just looking at an overall sample, I think a lot of people reached out to us this week and said that they thought you were spot on with what your evaluation was based on what they've seen on their farm.
That's exactly the comments I got. I didn't have one person that disagreed with what I reported, and it's basically just my observation. But yeah, I think it's spot on. I think it's going to prove to be spot on as season goes on.
Yep. So we're going to take a little bit more time this week because we've gotten so many questions. There's been a huge spike in listeners with downloads this last month. So we want to kind of try to get ahead a little bit of listener submitted questions this week, because here in just a couple weeks we're going to be spending more time each podcast talking about what you see in the field in the tree stand every night. So I know that's going to take up some of our segment. We got our fall plots in. We're really just waiting for rain. So in this episode, I think what our strategy is going to spend a little bit more time with listener submitted questions to get caught up on those. Don, before we take a break for the Osseo spot and then come back for these questions, why don't you remind everybody where to submit questions and what we provide back in return if we use their question on air?
Yeah, go to chasinggiants.com and there's a form there you can fill out to submit your questions. You can also, if you don't have access to the internet, like a lot of our Amish listeners, you can submit by, just writing it on a piece of paper and sending it to Real World Wildlife Products, Post Office Box 55 in Arthur, Illinois. And the zip code is 61911. Be sure to include your address and the size of t-shirt that you wear. If we use your question, we'll send you a free Chasing Giants t-shirt. And I seen a lot of those t-shirts at my event last night, Terry, and I'm guessing you probably seen a couple too.
Couple, not many. The majority of my crowd was Amish, so I didn't see as many, but there was quite a few people there. Really, I was shocked. There was a lot of non-hunters there. Probably at least the people that raised their hand, only about 2/3 of the crowd hunt, and not as many had listened to the podcast yet. So we might have a lot of new listeners this week just from the people that were there. I had a lot of people come up and ask what the MTech and other call-in numbers were. So hopefully a lot of new listeners this week just from the event itself. So if you have a question, again, make sure you leave your name and address on it. And remember that Miss Janice opens up that mail and sees your question. So the people that send some funny comments, remember that Miss Janice will probably see your question before we get a hold of it. So let's take a quick break, listen to a spot from Osseo, and come back with our listener submitted questions for the week.
Osseo Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. Osseo has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit asiogear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
All right, Don. Well, I know everybody's going to ask what joke I had bomb at my event, and I'll go ahead and tell everybody. I was kind of setting the stage for what my vision of what heaven's going to be like. And, when you take a deer hunter from Kentucky that's just, a glorified redneck, and, I got into talking about salvation, and, those who are saved get to go to Judgment Day and get to hear those words, good and done, faithful servant. And you walk through those pearly gates. And I said, I can just imagine walking through this gate and there being this big line of real world miscanthus on the right-hand side, and this like 18-20 foot ladder stand going up into a tree right behind it. And you're kind of just in awe. And all of a sudden you hear this psst, and St. Peter's up in the tree stand with a 7 mag and say, y'all jump in the truck and go up to the big house. The deer's getting ready to come out. It's like, I think that's a good vision of what heaven's going to be, but I had a lot of blank stares at me. I don't think they got the context of the Southern boy and jumping up and going to the big house. So
Yeah.
I needed a sound effect that just went wah wah at the end of it, but
maybe we should get Ray and Aiden on our entertainment committee so that they can tell us some jokes that we can repeat.
Yeah, I think they do have a lot of corncob jokes and different things like that. And I meant to ask you, was anybody disappointed that Al Foster didn't really have his kissing booth there set up at your event?
There was one guy that asked Al Foster about his kissing booth at the event. I heard it. We was in line for, I think it was breakfast this morning. Yeah, we was in line for breakfast this morning, and there was a little shed out there, a little shanty shack, that's about 10 foot by 8 foot. And this guy comes up to me and Al waiting in line. He says, "Hey, Al, is that your kissing shack out there?"
It is absolutely amazing how we can make just some little comment or phrase off the cuff on this podcast and how long it sticks around and people remind us of it for a long time. But all right, well, let's jump into questions if that's okay. And then we have a Biofarm segment with Wayne Keller that I want to fit in here in between a couple questions.
Okay, the first one comes from Parker Rediker from Madison, Kansas. He says, Don, last week you talked about the drought affecting older bucks' antler growth. I experienced the exact thing and had a mature buck that went way downhill. Should I shoot the deer anyway, knowing he's a mature deer, or should I let him go in hopes weather swings back to normal next year and hope he comes back to form? You think it's possible for a buck to regain past form, or do you think once he slides, he's done? Thanks for taking the time to answer my question, and God bless. Prayers for Andrea and your family. We'll certainly appreciate the prayers, Parker. Please keep those up. As far as bucks bouncing back, yeah, it's very possible. I got that question a lot this week in text and emails, and that's the reason I picked this submitted question. I figured there's a lot of people wondering the same thing. But yeah, they absolutely can bounce back. It just, when you go to managing the bucks on the property that you own or hunt, take that into consideration. A big part of whether you shoot or don't shoot is what bucks you got coming up behind that buck. If you've got a good crop of young bucks, you may want to go ahead and take him out. And that's exactly what I'm going to do with Babe this year. He's had his chance at 6 years. I got some really nice young bucks coming up behind him. He's going to get shot. If it's not me or my grandson, somebody's going to shoot that deer this year, barring anything unforeseen. But yeah, absolutely. Bucks can come back and put on even more inches than they had ever had before.
Do you think that people get a little bit too focused on a one buck situation? What should I do about this one buck, and only talk about that one buck versus really looking at the big picture on your property with your deer herd? We get burned up with questions this time of year with social media private messages and said, should I shoot this deer? We don't know how old the deer is. We don't know what the goals of the hunter is, but I have a hard time answering that question because we don't know the whole situation. Just like you said, you might not want to shoot a buck because you don't have the age structure below it and you want to give that guy a chance to go another year. Or he might be borderline of what you want, but the right thing to do is take him out because your 3-year-old crop is fantastic.
That's exactly right, Terry. It's just there's so many variables there. It's hard to say, and each individual hunter and land manager has to make the decision for himself. If you're fine with let's say 150-inch buck, then your decision may be totally different than somebody that's trying to grow a 180-inch buck. And we don't know what the bucks are going to do next year. Next year may be a fantastic antler growing season, or it may be another poor season. So the buck you let go, hoping that he would bounce back to form and or even add inches from what he had ever been, he may actually go backwards further than he already has.
Yeah, there's no real answer, because if your goal is a 180-inch buck, you have to kind of decide, do I let the older buck that I have now have a chance to get to 180, or do I shoot him and hopefully one of my 3-year-olds has the opportunity to get there? But they both might get shot by the neighbor. I appreciate people reaching out to us like they do it's an everyday thing, but there's just no answer that we can give to people because we don't know the whole situation. And if you like him, if he looks like something that accomplishes your goals and you're not only for that buck, but the farm, let the air out of him,
Absolutely.
All right. Good question, Parker. We'll move on to the second one.
So this one comes from Jay Brandenberger from Grable, Indiana. He says, hello, Don and Terry. Number one, so I realize the right small parcel with the perfect surroundings is the best, but those are hard to find, and I can't afford the huge piece in perfect state either at the moment. But to my understanding, according to Dr. Strickland and his studies, deer have the genetics to reach a certain ceiling, but in certain areas don't have the food source and nutrition and management to reach that ceiling due to the rising cost of land per acre. Would I be better off with 50 acres in, let's say, Ohio or Illinois, or buy 250 acres in Minnesota or Wisconsin for the same price and have Wes meet up with me again and create food and structure for the deer and have a better chance of holding some bucks until they reach mature age than the smaller parcel and having to worry about neighbors shooting the 140-inch 3-year-old every year? Or number two, or do you think in the cheaper land states, I wouldn't be satisfied with the overall results of the buck class? I'm okay with waiting and doing the work to help the property produce as long as it's something that's possible. And buck class meaning, just like y'all, I'm not wanting to produce deer that max out at 150. Thanks, guys, and keep up the informative podcast and real world products. Well, Jay, your question basically boils down to one thing. It's not the size of the property. It's not the state the property's in. It's the property itself and what surrounds that property. You can take a 40-acre tract that sits next to a 1,000-acre sanctuary, and I use this example today in my talks with the guys there at that event. That tract has a lot more potential because of what's around it. You could take 250 acres, as you mentioned, and if it's surrounded by, heavy hunting pressure, it's going to be really hard to grow giants there. So it's this specific property. It's got nothing to do with the state. It's got nothing to do with the amount of acreage. It's 100% about the property itself and what sits around that property. And then that could happen in any state. You can go to Iowa, a state that's known for great deer hunting, and you can have a terrible property in Iowa. You can go to a state like Michigan, who's known for a hunter behind every tree, and you can have a great property in Michigan. It just, it's way more about the property than it is the state and the size.
Biofarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Well, welcome to this week's Biofarm segment. We have Wayne Keller on the line, and we really want to take an opportunity this week to dive into a property we've mentioned before on the podcast, but haven't really had Don dive into it. So, Wayne, I'm going to start with you, and then Don can pick it up. This is a 730-acre tract in Franklin County that Don has been a part of, even from doing a plan, but also doing a lot of visits. So why don't we start with you, Wayne, and then we'll move to Don about this property.
Sure. Well, it's 732 acres. We've got a home on it, buildings. Don has worked on it for about 16 years, and it is an incredible hunting tract. There is also opportunity for waterfowl hunting because there's several large shallow water lakes on it. So you've got all kinds of opportunity for hunting on it. And there's also a line of machinery that comes along with it, and ATVs, and it's all good stuff. It's not junk machinery, it's good machinery.
Yeah.
And Don knows more about the property than I do because he's been on this farm for about 16 years now. So I'll let him talk about it from here.
Yeah, I know this property very well. Know the seller, and met him many years ago. And this property is not far from Benton, Illinois. Just I'd say it's no more than probably 2 or 3 miles from Benton. And when I say 2 or 3 miles, I mean 2 or 3 miles from Walmart and a bunch of restaurants and everything else. So real convenient as far as that goes.
And Don, one thing I'll mention, Don, is it's only maybe 4 miles from the Marin Lake Marina.
Right. Real close to Wren Lake. So there is just a world of possibilities on this place. And it really is almost in 3 tracks, each track separated by a road. If you can imagine a T road or a T intersection, and you would own at that T, you would own both sides of the road and everything in front of you. So it would be really easy for a group of buyers to get together and subdivide this property into 3 tracks. I don't think the owner is interested in subdividing whatsoever. He wants to sell it all. at one shot. But, I started working on this tract, I think it was 16 years ago. And the owner just kept buying more and more and adding to it. And every time he did, he would have me come down and consult on it some more and, put new plans in place. But really diverse property as far as different habitat there. For the waterfowl hunter, there's some shallow water wetlands that were designed for waterfowl, and it's in a great area for hunting waterfowl. It's got a river that flows through the property, and is that the Kaskaskia River, Wayne, or
No, it's the Muddy River.
the Muddy River?
The Muddy. It's a big Muddy. Yes.
The Big Muddy. I know that the current owner, he has a boat launch on the farm where he launches a boat right into the river. Fantastic fishing. I know he catches a lot of catfish, especially on the river. Turkeys galore, whitetails like crazy. He's got a good food plot program, and Terry's scrolling through some of the pictures on the listing. You can see some of the big deer that have lived on this farm, and it's had very, very minimal hunting pressure. The current owner, he does not live on the property. He lived, I think, about 3 hours or more away, and spend weekends and days off and such there. And it was just kind of his recreational getaway. So there was really not a whole lot of pressure put on the property as far as on the deer herd. So there ought to be good age structure. Like I said, good food plot program. There is a nice home on the property that could serve as the hunting cabin or whatever, or it could be subdivided off and sold off by the new owner. Good outbuildings. I'm seeing pictures of them right here that Terry's putting up on the screen. This guy took fantastic care of everything he ever owned. And you can see that from these pictures, how the yard there at the home is nicely manicured and well taken care of. The equipment that the guy's got is top notch. There's nothing second rate about it. There's some other ponds and such on the property for fishing and whatever, but you're not going to find 700 plus acres in one tract very often, especially one like this. It's had this much work put into it. I mean, myself, I've done tree plantings on the property. We've planted native grasses, miscanthus, just all kinds of habitat work. And the work's done. I mean, the plan was put in place several years ago, and the landowner got right with it and got it done. So basically, it's ready to roll for the new owner.
Don,
I'm not sure. Yes.
Don, looking at this and hearing you talk, we talk a lot about intrusion on our podcast and putting pressure on a property, but with the way this is laid out, and this is really big enough that if somebody enjoyed turkey hunting, duck hunting, fishing, and deer hunting, it's big enough and spread out enough that you could really do a little bit of everything without causing a lot of harm, unlike some smaller tracts.
That's exactly right. And like I said, Terry, it almost divides into 3 different sections with that road. And if you're hunting in one section, you're putting absolutely 0 human pressure on the other 2. So, you could go duck hunting in the morning on one section, and that afternoon you could be deer hunting in a section, and that the duck hunting you did that morning would not be affecting where you was hunting that afternoon. So very diverse, a lot of CRP plantings, tree plantings on the property, but it's an opportunity that's not going to come along that often for that big a property and have it already set up and ready to go. And I should probably also add that there's a pretty good stand of timber on that farm. In fact, I think the owner was looking at one time of potentially harvesting that timber. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was like about a year and a half ago. I was on the farm to make some further suggestions as he was thinking about marketing the property. And I told him that he may want to consider harvesting that timber before he sold, but He did not do that to my knowledge. I think that timber is all there. So there's potential for income right there.
Yeah, that's correct. And, one thing I'll point out too, or reiterate something you said, if someone would buy this, they don't have to do anything to get ready to hunt. All they have to do is buy the property and show up with their shotgun or their bow, and they're ready to go.
Yeah, and the equipment's ready for maintaining food plots and everything else. When you buy this place, you don't have to haul anything in to get started or purchase anything. I mean, everything you need is right there.
And the food plots are already sowed, and so it's ready to go for fall. And man,
Yep.
I've seen some of his trail cam pictures. Oh my God, there's some monsters out there.
Yeah, there's
And
actually
there should be.
snapshots. Your entire plan is not on the Biofarm section, but they did put some of the maps that you drew up in some of your habitat plans, Don, on the website. So if you want to go to biofarm.com and go to Franklin County, or it's actually featured on their homepage, look for a 730 plus acre Franklin County. Great looking spot. It would be a great thing for someone to subdivide, a group of people going together. You could do a lot of things with this.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's right. But the thing is, he would like to see it sold at once, but 2 or 3 guys could get together and split it up.
yeah, that's exactly right, Wayne. That tract that's got the home and such on it, if someone didn't, care for that, that's easily, I mean, it sits on one side of the road where that could easily be listed and sold off to recoup some of that money that was, put out to purchase it all.
Yep. And all the equipment,
And
there's pictures. There's pictures of the equipment, a list of all of the equipment. Everything is documented really well on the Biofarm page. So, Wayne, if somebody wants to learn more, what do they need to do to get a hold of you to come see it or talk to you about it?
Well, my phone number is 800-357-4020. They can give me a call or just go on to biofarm.com and you can look me up there, or wkeller@biofarm.com.
Okay. Any last things you want to say about it before we move on?
I'm good here.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show. If you're interested, go to biofarm.com or follow them on their social media to learn more about this and other properties that are featured every week. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Take care, Wayne.
Goodbye.
So next one comes from Chase Myers from Kendall Park, New Jersey. It says, my name is Chase Myers from New Jersey, asking you about sunflowers for deer, if it's a good food plot to have or not. Thank you, Don, for your podcast, and we wish you all the best for your family and your daughter. I appreciate that, Chase. As far as sunflowers go, absolutely, they have a place for deer. I don't plant a lot of them just because I don't have enough plot space to do everything that I'd like to do. But I can tell you that Joe Johnson, the shed antler hunting friend of mine, there was a few years ago, I remember whenever he was hunting shed antlers on some public ground, and on this public ground, there was some sunflower fields that have been planted for doves. And that particular year, Joe found an ungodly number of sheds around the sunflower fields as the deer were out there picking around, I guess. My issue with sunflowers is typically they mature too quick. And then when they do, they get eaten up before winter. I'm trying to focus my food plot program on having quality food sources available when the deer need it most, and that's late winter, early spring. So I know a lot of hunters are just trying to have plots for hunting season, but when you're trying to grow giants, you need to focus your efforts on when those deer need it the most, because during the fall, that's the time of plenty. That's when the acorns are there, the farmers' crops are in the fields available, and everything else. You need to plan for when the food supplies in the shortest or lacking for your local deer herd. And sunflowers, if you plant them, they're just not going to still be around in most cases during that time period. So that's why I planted sunflowers. I just did last year. And if I do, typically what I do is I terminate them in time to plant a fall plot in them, like Deadly Dozen, which is what I did last year. So they have their place. Deer definitely like them. We'll eat them, but for the reasons I explained, I don't make those a major part of my food plot program.
Well, I think I don't want to put words in your mouth by any means, but a key point to this is where you live, food is not an issue in the spring and the summer because of how much big ag it would be. So if you're in an area that has zero food and you're looking for that diversity for deer to eat something through all times of the year, it might be a great complementary product to put out there, but it's not a sustaining or a, kind of center hub food product that like a soybean or a corn would be.
Right. Yep. Well said.
Well, speaking of soybeans, I want to pick your brain a little bit. And usually we do this at the beginning of the podcast, but I'm going to do it right now. You made a social media post this week about trail cameras spooking deer that got quite a bit of attention. Let's take a quick break from the listener submitted questions. Walk us through that post, what those two pictures were. I'll have it up on the screen right now for the people watching on YouTube. But walk us through what that post was about and what you saw in those two pictures.
Well, I had a trail camera on the edge of a soybean field. It was a small soybean field that kind of secluded. The deer really like to feed in. And past history has shown that, a bachelor group of bucks hangs out in that area. So I've had the camera there all summer. Well, this group, I checked the camera this week. I actually moved it off of that food source. But when I checked the card, there was a series of pictures of a group of bucks. There was 3 in all. Now the picture's only going to show 2 of them. The pictures I shared only showed 2 of those bucks. But I got 3 or 4 pictures of those bucks. And then I got 2 pictures back to back, just seconds apart, of the buck looking right at the trail camera. And then the next picture, which was 4 seconds later, was the bucks running. That buck looked at that trail camera and spooked, and then all the bucks took off. I have no doubt that he spooked from the camera. He was a 5.5-year-old buck, a mature buck. And my point was that, some bucks will tolerate trail cameras. You can get their picture on the camera day after day after day, multiple times a day, dozens of pictures a day, and they just keep coming back. It doesn't bother them whatsoever. They even look at the camera. Sometimes they come up and sniff it, and you get a close-up of their eye or something like that. There's other bucks that do not tolerate it. They just won't tolerate it. It represents danger. It spooks them somehow. And this buck obviously was spooked by that trail camera. And it was an opportunity for me to point that out to the followers or anyone that's seen that post and have proof positive of what I'm talking about. Here's what happened. Okay. And that's not the first time I've seen it. I've seen it other times, but that was just a good opportunity for me to show 2 pictures taken 4 seconds apart. One picture, the buck is looking right into the camera, and the next picture, the bucks are running straight away.
And it wasn't a situation where ground center, anything had been there. You had not been in the area. And that buck had also been in, you have other trail camera pictures of that buck. It was just something in that situation said, something's not right. I'm out of here. So it wasn't a buck that you hadn't had pictures of or had been walking in front of other cameras on your farm. It wasn't ground scent or other intrusion that happened. It's just some things, these bucks get so smart, they say, I'm out. And I think things like this are a perfect example. And I think you made it in your post that trail cameras have obviously sealed the deal for a lot of hunters on some bucks to be shot, but they've probably saved a few bucks from being shot over the years too.
Yep. I fully believe that for every buck killed because of a trail camera, another buck was saved because of a trail camera.
All right. Interesting post. We'll move on to the next question.
All right. This one comes from Jack Bowers from Edwards, Illinois. He says, "Hey, Don and Terry, when searching for that next property to begin to grow and hold mature deer, what aspects of that property are you focusing on the most? You talk about access is key and having multiple access points and looking beyond the borders of your property. I was just wondering if there were other features such as water, income, accessibility with machines, and or any other features. Thanks for taking the question. I greatly appreciate what you guys are doing for the hunting and whitetail industry." Well, isolation is huge, Jack. A property that's isolated from others, in other words, it's surrounded by non-hunting properties or properties that don't get hunted, that's absolutely huge because you can provide what you need on that property, and not have people sit in the fence or sit in the property line taking advantage. When you have people sit in your line, you know, most deer hunters don't play the wind like they should. They don't pay as much attention to access as they should. So they're coming in with on a poor access route with a bad wind, and they're educating the deer on your property, especially a smaller property. So, you know, the layout of the property is absolutely critical. And if it's isolated, that is a really huge factor in being able to maximize the potential of that property. You know, you listed a couple others, access points. That's very important as well. So, you know, you pretty much, I think, based on reading your submission, I think you got the handle of it. But the one thing is property layout. We just did a video on the Whitetail Master Academy that I think it was just released this week. If it's not, it's going to be released next week. But it's the 4 cornerstones of a world-class whitetail property. It's the 4 things that you really got to have to grow world-class bucks on a consistent basis. And number 1 is property layout. And property layout is something you cannot do anything about. It's, you know, the creek is where it's at, the road is where it's at, the access points are where they're at. It's what you're given. The number 2 cornerstone is property design, how you work with what you're given. But property layout is the most critical aspect or ingredient for a world-class property, and it's something you cannot do anything about whatsoever. So every whitetail property has a ceiling. How big a bucks can this property produce on a consistent basis? And some bucks that it's going to be really low. That ceiling may be, you know, 120-inch bucks, depending on the state it's in and other factors like that. And other properties may have a really high ceiling. You know, they may be able to produce booners on a consistent basis and with occasional 200s. You need to take a look at the ceiling, and the ceiling is dictated by the layout. And then everything else that you do, it pushes your actual results to that ceiling. So the ceiling is nothing, you can't affect that whatsoever. The layout, the ceiling, totally out of your hands. Everything else is in your hands. That's how you push the bucks on the property to that ceiling. So yeah, I hope that helps.
It makes perfect sense. And I think there's a lot of hunters that maybe have sacrificed, worked hard, and go out and they look for that dream property. You know, Wes, with his property, that's a perfect example. I think he's had that property now, this is the 3rd year, and he's yet to hunt on it as he's dialing it in. But the thing he was looking for was layout, you know, from the very beginning. Now he's putting his plan together. And then you have a lot of other guys that have a family farm or a permission farm, and it is what it is. And really, you're able to make it as good as you can make it based on your discipline of, you know, our family's farm is a good track, and it does not produce a giant every year. And I only have access to hunt one wind direction. So, you know, it's on that property. If it's not a west and maybe northwest wind, I don't hunt. So it takes a lot of time and opportunity away from me. I just think a lot of people are in two different boats. They're wanting to put money and time into something that's not attainable because the layout isn't there. But I think you can still, with discipline, make the most out of your property to make it as good as you can be. You have to be realistic with what you expect.
Yeah, that's right. You can help any property be better. There's projects you can do, things you can do to make any property better, but there's nothing you can do to push it past its ceiling.
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.
All right. Well, we have a 2-pager here for the next submission. So I'm going to let you start here, and then the question's actually going to be on the next page.
Yeah, so this one comes from Mark White from West Lebanon, Indiana. And just to give a little background on Mark, he is neighbors and good friends with my daughter and son-in-law. So he had some good things to say about them and the struggle they're dealing with currently in his submission here. And Mark was also the guy that won the Quiet Cat bike on the Lester's Feet auction or raffle here, 2 years ago. So Mark's a good friend of Corey and Andrea and a friend of mine as well. And he says, Don and Terry, thanks for a fantastic podcast. The things that I appreciate the most about you guys are your integrity, transparency, willingness to help others, and most importantly, your faith. I would like to get something off my chest quick before I ask my question. Corey, parentheses the ninja, as nicknamed by Terry, and Andrea Hamilton are great friends of ours. They are the most selfless people I think I have ever met. Andrea has a tough battle ahead of her, and I ask that everyone listening to this podcast please continue to pray for her, Corey, their sons Wyatt and Walker, and Dawn and Robin as they tackle this together. Andrea's battle has already strengthened my faith. My faith wavered about 12 years ago when I lost someone very close to me. I was angry at God for quite a while. Over time and through prayer, I've renewed my faith. We pray as a family every evening before dinner, and last week our 6-year-old son asked if he could pray for the meal. This is the first time that he has wanted to do this. I was expecting just a simple prayer blessing the food, but he asked God to heal Andrea and to help the Hamiltons through this tough time. That really hit me hard. My wife and I looked at each other and smiled. So whether Andrea knows it or not, her battle is already impacting the lives of others in a positive way. And then Mark goes on to ask the question. He says, now for my question. I know a fair amount about habitat management on smaller properties, but one thing I know very little about are fruit trees. I own a 40-acre farm that produces some outstanding bucks every year. My property sits adjacent to a 200-acre wildlife preserve, so it hunts much larger than it is. The bedding areas are pretty good, and I have all my blinds set up with access and wind in mind. I give the deer the entire interior of my property to bed in, and I hunt the fringes only. That's where most of my plots are. The one thing that my property lacks is soft mass trees. What advice would you give on the specific kinds of trees, how many to plant, and how to arrange them? I have about a 1-acre area that is currently a food plot that I want to dedicate to soft mass trees. Thanks for all that you guys do. Don will continue to pray for Andrea and your family. We'll celebrate when she rings that bell. Well, Mark, I appreciate your comments. I know what a good friend you've been to them. I was actually, to share something with the listeners, I was there one time to help Andrea unload a load of redneck blinds from a semi that had showed up because they're dealers for both redneck and 360 blinds. And, the semi had got there a little bit earlier or something, so it beat me there. And by the time I got there, Mark had already had probably 2/3 of that semi unloaded. Him and Andrea, he was pushing them to the back of the semi, and she was driving the tractor with the forks, unloading those blinds. So I know he's been there for them when they've needed help many times. So a great friend of them, and I truly appreciate that. To get to your question, Mark, on the fruit trees, basically fruit trees are a way to really help set your property apart from other properties around it. It's something that you don't just go out today and plant fruit trees, and this fall you've got fruit there enough to pull in the deer. Fruit trees is something that separates the really serious land manager from the guy that's just looking for a way to pull deer in so he can shoot them. And I've continued to this day to plant fruit trees on my property, and even knowing that I may not fully benefit from some of those. It'd be my grandsons that reap the true benefit. But you want to put those fruit trees. You want to just think of them as another food plot. I mean, that's exactly what they are. What I like to do is put them around the edges of my food plots. So I've still got a plot. Having those trees around the edge is just more pulling power. It's an additional food source at the same location. So you're pulling those deer to the same location. And then I've got a couple places where it's basically just fruit trees. It's not like there's a food plot there. I'll use them to enhance stand locations. If the stand location is in a more open area where the fruit trees can get plenty of sunlight and produce well, I will put a handful of fruit trees there. Diversity is key on the fruit trees. I think you want pears and apples for sure. With the apples, I'd suggest about 1/4 of your apples actually be crab apples. Crab apples have a tendency to have a lot more blooms on them, and they produce a whole lot more pollen, and just really helps to pollinate your other apple trees, because one apple tree can pollinate another. They can cross pollinate. So about 1/4 of my apple trees are actually crab apples. What you want to look for is species or varieties that are disease resistant and that ripen later in the year during hunting season. You don't want apple trees that are going to ripen in August. You want them October and November, and even later if you can find them. So diversity, don't stick with one variety. I seen it on my place this year, as I have many, many times, is that these trees, you get a late frost or freeze in the spring, and a lot of times you will lose the fruit, for that year. And with different varieties of trees, they're kind of pollinating at slightly different times. And this year, for example, I lost the fruit crop off of some of my trees when we got a late freeze this spring. But then I got other trees that are just absolutely loaded with apples. And that's where diversity really helps you. Pears, I think deer probably like pears better than apples from what I've seen. Now, that doesn't mean they don't like apples. That doesn't mean you shouldn't plant apples. You should plant both, but don't overlook pears. And then if you happen to be in an area where there's not a lot of persimmons can really help set your property apart. If you're going to plant persimmons, though, make sure you plant grafted female persimmons, because if you just plant persimmon seedlings, a good portion of them will be male trees that'll never produce fruit for you. So grafted female trees will produce fruit, every one of them. So that's kind of my spiel on fruit trees.
Great information. There is a ton of information about fruit trees on the Whitetail Master Academy. You've done a lot of educational videos on that topic, so go check that out. And Mark, I feel you, man. when you talked about losing someone and getting angry at God, we've all gone through phases in our life where stuff doesn't make sense. And there's a lot of emotions. We see it a lot with the Lester's Feet families that we try to work with. And it's everything from you blaming God to you questioning God as, my child or my family member or my friend getting punished for things that I've done wrong. Or there's the very common bargaining with God, say, you heal my daughter and I'll do this for you, season that we all go through. And it's just human emotion, and it's normal. Don't think that it's wrong. You just have to trust that actually on this week's Sunday night prayer time on the Chasing Giants TV channel, Devin Hurley talked about that all things are for your good and his glory. Go check that out if you're struggling with that. Devin did a really nice, probably 4-minute video talking about dealing with struggle and being content. So it's a tough situation navigating it whenever we see our loved ones hurting. That's for sure.
The next question comes from Dalton Rockhold from Zanesfield, Ohio. He says, how do I get my bucks to daylight? I have amazing nighttime activity from the mature deer, but they never show their face when shooting light is legal. How do I get them to change their schedule? Thanks. Well, that's pretty easy, Dalton. You're telling me from the information that you're sharing, you're telling me that the bucks are not bedding on your property. If they were bedding on your property, you would see some daylight activity. Apparently those bucks are bedding off your property and they're not getting to your property till dark. You're going to have to create some bedding cover, and you're going to need to stay out of it and cut down the human intrusion. That's how you're going to get more daylight activity out of your bucks. And this is something that I've heard numerous times is I get plenty of nighttime pictures, but I just don't get daylight pictures especially of the big bucks. Well, that just tells me that the big bucks are not bedding on your property, or you would at least get some.
Yep. We've talked about that quite a bit on the podcast. So, all right, Don, well, fun episode. Thanks to Wayne Keller for coming on and talking about that big 730-acre tract that you've done some programs on over the years. We appreciate so much all the support that we were given with our 2 speaking engagements. And we're going to have some news coming up here really soon. The board of Lester's Feet has decided what we're going to be doing this winter for fundraising and trying to connect with a few more families. And we got some news that's going to be released in coordination with the big event for the Shipshewana show that's going to be in February of 2024. And there's going to be a big event there. I think the Legends Roundtable is going to be starting to get promoted here before too long. So we got a lot of things cooking for this coming winter, and teeing up next week as far as it is building the podcast, building our platforms and ministry, and also helping families through the Lester's Feet Foundation. So do you have any projects this week, Don, for hunting prep, or are you ready to go and just buying your time?
Well, I'm headed to Ohio this week. Me and my group that does the Ohio properties bought 2 more properties. Bought a 75-acre tract that I've never stepped foot on. I'm going to see it. Liked what I seen from the area. One of the partners went and walked it, and basically bought it right on the spot. And then we also bought a 430-acre property. I'm going to stop and visit it. Steve Shields is going to go with me. We're going to start some video projects on both of those properties. I'm going to stop at the Ohio State University in Columbus. We're going to produce a video with a couple of apple experts and from Ohio State University, tour a couple of orchards as part of that day. So we're going to spend an entire day on that project. So I'm going to spend about 3 days in Ohio this coming week. And after that, I'll be home and be focused on getting ready for the upcoming season, which will be about a week or so away.
All right.
How about you, Terry?
I have cooler temps coming in and westerly winds. So the time change before this time change happens, I can pretty much hunt every evening, even after work. So I'm going to be in the stand as much as possible. And I think all of my bucks, except for one that I've seen, are out of velvet now. I only have one smaller buck that's in velvet. So hoping that shift, maybe I pick something up. You never know.
Well, I hope you do.
So
I hope you kill the buck you're after and send me some pictures.
Yep. So before we sign off here, I have a prayer request. If everybody could lift up and remember Don and I's good friend Todd Covey. His father got some pretty bad news this week, so I know Todd's taking it really hard. He's really close with his dad, and they're going to be in for a little bit of a battle themselves, just like Don's family is. So you guys remember the family of Todd Covey, and keep them in your prayers for me. I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, all prayers are definitely appreciated on all counts. So just appreciate all the people that have reached out to me about my situation, but also appreciate that you guys look out for each other. And when we've got a prayer request, I know you guys rally around that.
Your daughter Andrea made a comment today. She went through the struggle of going ahead and cutting her hair. And that's a big deal for us. It's not a big deal to buzz cut us, but for a lady, it's a big deal. And she made a comment that when she's feeling down, she goes back and reads all of these comments from people that she doesn't even know, and how inspiring and uplifting it is. So I want you guys to know that your interaction and engagement with not only Andrea, but anybody when they're dealing with struggle, it really does mean a lot. And I think we take that for granted sometimes. We take for granted the comment, "We'll be praying for you," without really praying. But regardless, that time in prayer, or that time to make that comment, really does benefit and encourage and enlighten people that are going through struggle. It's like this army of people around you that you don't even know personally, but I know it's appreciated on all counts.
Yeah, it definitely is. So hope you guys all have a great week. God bless. We'll see you back here next time.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Biofarm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.